What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? Rerun banners have begun in Honkai Star Rail, and the first rerun banner will be Seele's, or Seele, depending on what part of the world you're from. It is a German name, in case you guys didn't know. Flame me in the comments when you disagree. Anyways, we're going to be doing a build guide in honor of Seele's rerun. So let's dive in. Alright, so we are going to be going over Seele's kit briefly. If you don't care about that or you already know what her kit does and whatnot, you can skip ahead, feel free to. I'm going to be putting timestamps down below so that you can do that if you're interested. However, it is good to go over characters briefly just to make sure we know what we're doing when we're building them and maybe optimizing everything properly. There are a lot of new players coming to the game with the new PS5 version, as well as just new players coming to the game all of the time. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at her talent. She enters the buff state upon defeating an enemy with a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, and receives an extra turn. So basically, if you defeat an enemy with her, you'll get an extra turn. While in the buffed state, the damage of Seele's attacks increase by 80% for 1 turn. Enemies defeated in the extra turn, provided by Resurgence, will not trigger another Resurgence. So just be aware that these extra turns won't give a Resurgence of their own, but you can kind of like trick this a little bit almost by using her ultimate or something like that and getting another trigger. So like you'll notice that sometimes in battle you'll get like 3 or 4 attacks off of Seele because she's just so strong. That's what gives her kind of like AoE value, even though she's actually a single target character, and what kept her at the top of the DPS charts for so long. She was DPS queen for many months. Anyways, let's check out her other bonuses. When current HP percentage is 50% or lower, it reduces the chance of being attacked by enemies. This comes through in clutch a lot of the time. Seele is almost never the ally that goes down. It's usually always somebody else for whatever reason. Anyways, Lacerate. While Seele is in the buffed state, her quantum resistance penetration increases by 20%, so it's kind of like a pseudo defense shred in a way, which is really strong, and it's pretty much always there as long as you're in the buff state, right? So let's check out her ultimate. Seele enters the buff state and deals quantum damage equal to 425% of her attack to a single enemy. Don't forget she gets the buff from being in the buff state as well. This is really strong, one of the highest multipliers we ever saw in the game for many months. And something cool about her basic attack that a lot of people probably aren't thinking about: after using a basic attack, Seele's next action will be advanced forward by 20%, and a lot of the time you can trigger Resurgence, which is what her talent does. By using a basic attack on an already weakened enemy, give yourself Resurgence, you'll give yourself another skill point back, that way you can pop her skill. This works really well. This is a combat effect you can use with Seele that isn't written in her kit, really strong. Now let's take a look at her skill. It increases Seele's speed by 25% for 2 turns, and deals quantum damage equal to 220% of Seele's attack to a single enemy. Really strong. That speed boost is really powerful because of this, you actually don't even need to build Seele for speed at all if you don't want to. The reason why you might want to build some speed on Seele is if you have her signature light cone. And for everyone who skipped, you don't get to hear this. If you have 129 speed on Seele and her signature light cone, you will be able to get all 6 stacks of her light cone's effect, which is really strong. Otherwise, if you don't have her signature light cone, you don't need to build her for speed because she'll get plenty of speed from her skill alone. It's really strong. Let's take a quick look at her technique. After using her technique, Seele gains stealth for 20 seconds. While stealth is active, Seele cannot be detected by enemies, and when entering battle by attacking enemies, Seele will immediately enter the buffed state. So this does work, but you unfortunately have to be the last. You have to be on Seele last in order for this to work, so some other characters might have better techniques to use last on than her. Just kind of depends on what your team build is. Alright, now let's go ahead and talk about the light cones first, because depending on what light cone we use, this might kind of change the pathway of the relic sets and the relic stats that we end up going for, such as the light cone giving us like crit rate or crit damage or something, and us kind of needing to fill the other side of crit with the relics. Anyways, let's talk about her signature light cone first, because it is her best in slot and it will be available during her banner. So everyone that has a Seele and wants to get her light cone during her rerun, this is your opportunity to get it. It increases the wearer's crit rate by 18%. This is all Superimposition 1 stats, by the way, because most people will be using it like this. And while the wearer is in battle, for every 10 speed that exceeds 100, the damage of the wearer's basic attack and skill is increased by 6%, and the crit damage of their ultimate is increased by 12%. This effect can stack up to 6 times. So if you have this light cone, this might be a reason why you might want to build some speed on your Seele so that you can max out these stacks. If you don't have this maxed out, I probably wouldn't build her for speed. However, if you do have this light cone, getting her to just enough to be able to get this speed stat would be worth it. And I'll show you an example of how much speed she gives herself in battle. I don't really have speed on my Seele, and she sits around 144 speed, meaning that she can get 4 stacks of this without even having to invest into anything whatsoever for speed. So if you invest a small amount, she'll actually be able to get all 6 of these stacks. This cone is really, really strong, even without all 6 stacks being there. It's easily her best in slot. It's not even close. Editor Pancake here. So if you are using her signature light cone, you only need 129 speed on her. Once she uses her skill, she will be able to give herself enough speed to eventually get all 6 stacks with her light cone to work, just so you guys know. Now let's go ahead and talk about the other option that most people use. This is the Herta Shop light cone cruising in the Stellar Sea. This is most used by players because it's the easiest accessible, that is also still very, very good. Let's take a look at it. I use this cone, just so you guys know. At Superimposition 5, which is what we're going to mostly be using it at, you can easily get Herta Shop cones to Superimposition 5. It increases the wearer's crit rate by 16% and increases their crit rate against enemies with HP less than or equal to 50% by an extra 16%. This helps us, kind of like finish off enemies that are already weakened. When the wearer defeats an enemy, their attack is increased by 40% for 2 turns. And again, these are Superimposition 5 values. So this is an amazingly good cone to be able to use on her. Don't feel bad if this is the cone you're using. I, to this day, still use this cone on her. So this is a very, very good cone, and it's a 5-star, so you get pretty good stats off of it, as you can see right here. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some other options we have as well. Most people use this cone, just so you know. It's readily available, easy to take to S5, and a lot of people just don't have her signature. Now let's take a look at Sleep Like the Dead, because this is a pretty good option. It increases the wearer's crit damage by 30%. When the wearer's basic attack or skill does not result in a crit hit, it increases their crit rate by 36% for 1 turn. This effect can only trigger once every 3 turns. Now here's the thing. She has multi-hit on her, I believe, her basic attack and skill. So you actually, I think it's just her skill. So you probably are going to crit throughout her skill. You're probably not going to get this second effect and get the extra crit rate. Although if you have her built properly, you don't need the extra crit rate anyway. So mainly what you care about is this 30% extra crit damage. These are S1 values. At S5, you get a massive 50% increase on your crit damage. So if you happen to have this at Superimposition 5, or maybe close, this is really, really strong. Definitely consider Sleep Like the Dead. It's a good cone. Now, I don't like Yangxing's other cone. After we're entering battle, increases the wearer's speed and damage by 12%, and when the wearer takes damage, this effect falls off. So if you get hit, it falls off. Not very good. Swordplay, if you switch targets, all the stacks fall off. Not very good. Seele has Resurgence. She's going to be clearing mobs and changing enemy targets regularly. This is a very bad cone for her. So to be perfectly honest with you, the only cones I'd be considering for her are In the Night, Cruising in the Stellar Sea, which is probably what most people will be using, especially at S5, or Sleep Like the Dead. Those are the main 3 options I would be looking at if I was you. We have Subscribe for More. It increases the damage of the wearer's basic attack and skill by 24%. This effect increases by an extra 24% when the wearer's current energy reaches its max level. This one is part of the gacha system, somewhat harder to get, and you usually want to take it up a little bit higher so that it does have a really good effect. A 5-star like Sleep Like the Dead still works well at S1 in comparison to, one of the other gacha kind of light cones that you usually need to take to S5. Alright, so let's go over some of the relics for Seele. We're going to go over main stats and substats and the different sets we can use on her. There are different options we can use. But first I wanted to do a little bit of a disclaimer. Seele is a little bit of a harder character to farm for in case you're considering going for her. And here's what I mean by that. So she has some pretty good crit damage traces here, as you can see. Pretty darn solid. There's 3 different ones. A lot of crit damage right there. However, she doesn't have anything in her kit that gives her crit rate or crit damage like Jingliu or Dan Heng while she's in combat. She has to get everything out of her relics before she ever enters combat. She doesn't get anything in the middle of combat. So as you can see here, I have to use a crit rate body piece on her in order to make up for the fact that I didn't get good enough crit rate substats. So I guess we'll just jump ahead for just a second. I would recommend using a crit damage body piece on her if you can, but you might have to use a crit rate body piece if you didn't get enough or good enough crit rate substats. Use a crit damage body piece or a crit rate body piece if you don't get the right rolls. As you can see here, I have 69.8 crit rate, so that I can tell my friends that I'm 69ing with Seele. Nice. And as you can see, I have 126.4 crit damage. As you might be able to tell, I wish I could boost this up, but I just didn't get the right stat rolls. We'll eventually build up our Seele more. I'm just focusing on other characters right now. And the break effect's at 25.9. A nice solid bonus because I use her with Silver Wolf, so this 25% break effect is actually pretty helpful. And you can see here that I have 115 speed right out of the gate. That's just her base speed. It's already really solid. And you don't need to build her up any more than this if you're not using her signature, because she will give herself 25% more crit. She'll give herself 25 more speed in the middle of combat, taking her up a pretty fat amount. And I've already done the math for you. If you are using her signature light cone, you need 129 speed on her in order to be able to build her speed high enough to get all 6 stacks that could come from her signature light cone. So if you are using her signature light cone, I would recommend having 129 speed on her so you get that extra bonus. If you aren't using her signature, you don't have to touch speed at all. In my personal opinion, she'll still give herself so much speed that she will still have over 134, giving her that 2-turn rotation every other cycle kind of ability. And let's go ahead and take a look at the feet now, because we went over the body. Definitely, because you don't need that extra speed, go for attack percent in my personal opinion. And because her speed already starts off so high, you don't need the speed boots. Even if you have her signature, you should try to go for speed substats to make up for the rest of this. You would need 14 speed on substats to be able to do the thing with the signature. You may have to use speed boots if you want, but I highly recommend going for speed substats and using an attack percent feat. And for the planar sphere, I would recommend using the quantum damage boost, of course. This is the easy part about building for Seele. There's pretty much one main route to go for when building her. It's not like there's a ton of different alternatives that are as optimal. She pretty much has like a main pathway. Damage from quantum for the planar sphere, attack percent rope because she has so much energy she's gaining from her resurgence, extra turns, and from her skill all of the time, and she has only 120 energy requirement for her ultimate. She's going to be ulting all the time. You do not need energy rope on her. Just build an attack percent rope. It's pretty easy. This is the best rope I have probably in the whole game, by the way. Look at this rope, man. 23% crit damage. Jesus. I love that rope. I'd let this rope sit on my face. I love that rope so much. And then, again, quantum damage boost, attack percent feat, and either crit rate or crit damage body piece. That part's pretty easy. Now let's go over the actual relic sets themselves. I'd recommend using Silsato for the planar ornaments. And the reason why is because it boosts the ultimate damage that she has by 15%. It's her highest damage multiplier, and she ultimates a lot. Yeah, she doesn't have a follow-up attack, but that's okay. Her ultimate more than makes up for it. And the Solsato crit requirement is a little bit lower than Rudolent Arena, so you don't have to focus on crit rate quite as much. You can hit this really easily. And I would recommend going for at least 63% crit rate on her so that she's critting really often. If you get at least 63% crit rate, somewhere around there, you should be critting most of the time. And something like her skill has multi-hit, so even if part of her skill doesn't crit, the rest of it should. That's kind of how things will go, and you'll get a crit with her ultimate most of the time if you do that. Obviously, you could aim for 69 crit rate because nice. So I highly recommend building enough crit rate to make sure you are actually critting with her. Now let's talk about the actual 4-piece sets here. The 4-piece quantum set ignores 10% defense all the time. If they're weak to quantum, it ignores 20% defense. So that's really strong, really powerful, a little bit circumstantial, but if you're able to pair her with a character like Silverwolf, then she's going to be able to pop the heck off. And there's a lot of enemies in a lot of situations that are weak to quantum, so she honestly, this is probably like her best in slot most of the time. However, there are other options as well. Some stuff that people might not necessarily be thinking about, like the 4-piece ice set. What the heck, Waff? What the heck, Pancake? What are you talking about? Check this out. After the wearer uses their ultimate, their crit damage increases by 25% for 2 turns. What? Yeah, she uses her ult really often, and giving her 25% crit damage is really good, and she gets it for 2 turns. By the time those 2 turns are over, she's probably going to be ulting again, resetting the 2 turns. So kind of wild that she can practically, like in the right circle, especially if she's defeating enemies. In some battles, she can have a 100% uptime on this until you get to the last boss. Then it's kind of stuck at the 2-turn thing. But again, if you have someone like Ting Yun on the team or something like that, giving her energy really often, you can keep a 100% uptime on this effect. It's actually really strong, and a lot of people don't necessarily think about this because it's not very obvious, because it's the ice set on a quantum character, but it can still be used. Again, Rudolent Arena exists, but I would go for Solsato if I was you. You can also run 2-piece quantum, 2-piece wild wheat for the 10% quantum and the 12% attack from the wild wheat set. What is it? Herta Space Station planar spheres exist. I would probably resort to going for different things than this, but sometimes people have to use placeholder sets while they're farming out better pieces. It's just the way that it goes sometimes. Farming is the name of the game when it comes to gacha games. So if you need to use a 4-piece wild wheat, for example, to be able to reach the speed stat for your Seele, if you are using her signature, then you might have to do that too, because you do get 6% off of this. So this may be what you want to use if you have her signature while you farm out better substats on other gear. So definitely consider these options for her. Alright, so this video is already getting pretty long, so I'll probably make a separate video going over team compositions for Seele. However, as a little bit of a bonus, we'll go over briefly some good character pairings for Seele, such as Bronya, who are, by the way, a little bit of a couple. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but in every game Seele and Bronya are in together, they are kind of like a thing together. So they also just so happen to pair really well in combat. Bronya uses her skill, gives priority to Seele. Seele gets a buff from it, and she pops off Queen. Really good pairing that you can use. Ting Yun as well can give attack power to Seele and give her energy through her ultimate. Ting Yun, once again, one of the best harmony characters you could ever possibly have in this game, and she's a 4-star accessible to basically everyone. And Silverwolf, of course, can apply quantum weakness to the enemies and defense shred them, which kind of synchronizes really well with the quantum set. But even without the quantum set, Seele will still benefit from having Silverwolf on the team. But you didn't need me to tell you that Silverwolf's one of the best characters in the game, and she unlocks mono quantum teams for Seele. So, if this video was helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, please leave a like and subscribe, and maybe Seele will let you touch her butt. Anyways, I'll catch you next time. Peace out.